The desert wind carried dust and secrets across the Arizona territory as Maria Whitefeather stood at the weathered door of the isolated ranch house. Her hand trembled slightly before she knocked, 3 deliberate raps that echoed in the twilight silence. She had walked 15 miles from the reservation, her moccasins worn thin, her resolve ironclad. When the door opened, she found herself face to face with Thomas McKenna, a man whose reputation for solitude was matched only by whispers of his kindness. Thomas squinted against the dying sun, surprised to find anyone at his threshold. The woman before him was young, perhaps 25, with eyes that held both determination and desperation. Her traditional Apache dress was dusty from travel, and she clutched a small leather pouch against her chest like a talisman. "I need your help," Maria said in careful English, learned from the missionary school she'd briefly attended as a child. "I want to give birth to a white baby." The words hung between them like a thunderclap. Thomas stepped back instinctively, confusion and alarm crossing his weathered features. He was a simple rancher, 40 years old, who'd chosen this lonely existence after losing his wife to fever 5 years prior. He raised cattle, fixed fences, and spoke to no one for weeks at a time. This request shattered his carefully maintained isolation like a stone through glass. "Ma'am, I think you better come inside and explain yourself properly," he managed, gesturing toward his modest parlor. His mind raced with implications, suspicions, and a strange curiosity about what could drive someone to make such a shocking declaration. Maria entered, her posture proud despite her vulnerability. She settled onto the rough-hewn chair he offered and began her story. Her husband had been killed 6 months ago by soldiers during a disputed land conflict. She was childless, and according to tribal customs increasingly influenced by the government agents, childless widows held little status or protection. But she had heard stories, dark whispers from other reservations, of how women who bore children with white features sometimes received better treatment, more rations, opportunities to work in white settlements. "I don't want my child to suffer as I have suffered," she said, her voice steady though her eyes glistened. "I want my baby to have chances, to move between 2 worlds. I have thought about this for months. You are known as an honest man, a man who doesn't cheat the Apache when they trade. I am not asking for marriage or love. I am asking for a future." Thomas sat heavily in his chair, the weight of her words pressing down on him. Outside, the coyotes began their evening chorus, a sound that suddenly seemed like mourning for the innocence of a world that no longer existed, if it ever had. The proposition hung in the air between them for 3 full days. Maria had nowhere else to go, and Thomas, despite his shock, couldn't turn her out into the desert night. He gave her his bedroom while he slept in the barn, a gentleman even in these bizarre circumstances. During daylight hours, they maintained a careful distance, yet found themselves drawn into unexpected conversations. Maria proved herself useful, mending his torn shirts with practiced hands, preparing meals with desert plants and herbs that made his simple beans and salt pork taste like celebration feasts. Thomas, in turn, shared his small library of books, watching as she traced the words with her finger, sounding out passages from Shakespeare and Whitman with endearing concentration. "Why me?" Thomas finally asked on the 3rd evening as they sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the desert in impossible colors. "There are towns, other men. Why ride all this way to knock on a stranger's door?" Maria was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer carefully. "Because the men in towns would use me and cast me aside, calling me savage. Because soldiers would take what they wanted and give nothing. Because you buried your Apache ranch hand, Jose, in your family plot when he died of snakebite, and you marked his grave with a proper stone. Because you are lonely but not cruel, isolated but not heartless." Thomas felt something crack inside his chest, some wall he'd built after Margaret's death. This woman had researched him like a scholar, had chosen him not randomly but deliberately, had seen in him something he'd forgotten existed. "This is madness," he whispered, but the protest sounded weak even to his own ears. "This is survival," Maria corrected. "My people are dying, Mr. McKenna, not just from bullets and disease, but from hopelessness. I watched my mother waste away after the long march, watched my father drink himself to death on reservation whiskey. I will not let my child inherit only grief." Over the following weeks, something unexpected bloomed between them. Not the passionate romance of dime novels, but something perhaps more valuable: understanding. Thomas taught Maria to read English more fluently, and she taught him Apache words, the names of stars and plants and animals in a language that had belonged to this land for centuries before English arrived. They worked side by side repairing his fence line, their hands sometimes brushing, their laughter occasionally breaking the desert silence. When Maria finally came to him one night under the full moon, it was not as strangers engaged in transaction, but as two wounded souls seeking solace in a harsh world. 9 months later, Maria gave birth to a daughter with Thomas acting as midwife, following her calm instructions as dawn broke over the desert. The baby emerged with a lusty cry, her skin neither fully white nor fully Apache, but something beautifully in between. Maria named her Dawn for the light breaking as she entered the world, and Thomas wept for the first time since Margaret's death. But the world was not kind to such hope. When Maria took Dawn to the reservation to register her birth, the agent looked at the child and saw opportunity for removal to a boarding school. When she went to the town of Socorro Springs to purchase supplies, white women clutched their children and whispered half-breed like a curse. Maria discovered that her child was too white for the Apache and too Apache for the whites, belonging fully to neither world despite her desperate hopes. Thomas watched Maria's spirit gradually dim as reality crushed her dreams. One autumn evening, as Dawn babbled happily in her cradle, Maria broke down completely. "I have made a terrible mistake," she sobbed into Thomas's shoulder. "I thought I could give her advantages, but I have only given her confusion and rejection." Thomas held her, and in that moment made a decision that surprised even himself. "Then we give her something else," he said quietly. "We give her love, and land, and the truth about both her peoples. We teach her Apache wisdom and white book learning. We raise her to be strong enough to carve her own path." "They will never accept us as a family," Maria said bitterly. "You will lose your standing, your business relationships." "I lost everything worth having once before," Thomas replied, looking at the baby and then at Maria. "I won't make that mistake twice. If the world won't accept us, then to hell with the world. We have each other, and we have this land. And that's enough." In the years that followed, they did indeed face hardship. Some ranchers refused to do business with Thomas. The reservation agent tried repeatedly to take Dawn away for schooling, but they persevered, creating their own small world where Dawn grew up speaking 2 languages, learning to rope cattle and gather medicinal plants, reading Dickens and listening to Apache creation stories. Maria never got the white baby she thought she wanted, the child who would move easily through a white world. Instead, she got something far more precious, a daughter who belonged to herself, and parents who loved each other, not despite their differences, but because of the understanding those differences had forged. The lonely cowboy's door had opened that dusty evening to more than a desperate woman with an impossible request. It had opened to the possibility that hope could exist in the margins, that family could be built from the wreckage of broken worlds, and that sometimes the future we need is nothing like the future we planned.